Hey everybody, welcome back to LiterADV. My name is Yev. I've got my 2018 Suzuki V-Strom in front of me, and one thing I've always wanted to do is to lower my foot pegs. So I went to AdventureTech.com and bought a foot peg lowering kit plus a gear shifter relocation kit. Gonna kill two birds with one stone. One, we're gonna make the bike a little more comfortable to ride for me, and also because of motorcycle boots, how big they are, it's gonna make the gear shifting a little bit easier. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is actually remove the gear shifter itself. This right here is a nut. It's an 8mm nut. We're just going to loosen that off. This is going to allow us to slip the gear shift assembly off of the shaft that comes out of the transmission. Okay, using a pair of circuit pliers, we're going to remove the security clip off the gear shifter. Be really careful with this, you don't want to lose this. I'll set it down, and then you're going to have a washer, just a flat washer on here. I'll take that off, set it down, and now that you've got this loose and this loose, this gear shift assembly will slide off of the gear shift post. And now the next thing you can do is you can remove the post itself. The reason we did this in this order is because if you take the whole assembly off, removing this post is going to be quite difficult. Using an adjustable crescent wrench, you can carefully remove the gear shift post. It's a pretty tight fit, so just be careful not to strip the nut. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab a 6mm Allen key and remove these two bolts over here. Okay, so if you look into your AdventureTech kit, you're going to have two plates, one larger plate and one smaller plate, and a bunch of hardware. What you're going to want to do is take the larger plate. If you look at it really quick, you'll see that one side has countersunk holes and the other side is completely flat. The countersunk side is going to go against the motorcycle, and the flat side is going to go towards you. Next, you'll pick up this little block. This little block is where the new gear shift location is going to go onto. And depending on how you place it on here is going to suit either a larger boot or a smaller boot. I'm a size 12. I'm going to go ahead and take the position that's furthest away from the center hole. So I got the block here. I've got 3 bolts. These are 5mm Allen bolts. And again, on the flat side, the side that's facing you, I'm going to place this block on here. And using the bolts from the back side, I'm going to screw them through and attach the block mount onto the plate. With pretty much most of the bolts that you're going to use on here, you're going to want to use some sort of a Loctite. In this case, I'm using a blue Loctite, which means that it is removable, but it's going to help secure all the hardware. Go ahead and tighten these up. Flat side out towards you. You've got this mount for your gear shift shaft, and the bolts on the back with some Loctite in between. Now the next thing you're going to want to do is grab the gear shifter shaft and apply some lock thread again to that. Again, I'm using a blue lock thread. And you're going to insert that and screw it in to the mount that you just placed on the assembly. I'm going to go ahead and tighten it up real snugly. Like that. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and take my foot peg now, and I'm going to attach it to this lowering kit. We're going to attach it like so, and on the back, you'll know you got the right holes if you're going into the countersunk holes. In the kit that comes, you'll have a handful of these 5mm countersunk bolts. You'll insert one on each side, and you're going to have 13mm nylon nuts. Now I'm going to go ahead and apply a little bit of Loctite onto here, just like I did on the other bolts. Loosely place those on. Now I'll use my 13mm socket on the 13mm nut and 5mm Allen key on the other side. I'm going to go back and forth here, that way they're evenly tightened. All right, there you go. Okay, now we can go ahead and put the gear shifter back on, but before I do that, I'm going to grease this post right here. Let's apply a little bit of grease on there. I'm going to slide the post onto this. And if your foot peg is in the way, you can just turn it up like this. And remember, you have a flat washer that goes on here, and then your C-clip. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install the foot peg back onto the gear shift side using the 2 OEM bolts. These are the 6mm Allen bolts. And I'm going to put a little bit of blue Loctite on here as well. Okay, so I've got my foot peg back on the bike, and you'll have to do this yourself with your shoe size, but basically you're going to want to adjust the adjustable rod for the gear shifter and make sure you have it level where you like it, and then you're going to slide this on the actual shaft of the transmission. I'm actually going to take mine off real quick. I would suggest putting just a tiny bit of grease on the shaft. Go ahead and get on my bike and just kind of make sure that I can still shift. I've got regular shoes on with boots. I know I'm going to have a little bit more height on my footwear. I'm also going to stand up. Okay, so for me that works. Again, this will be an 8mm socket. Okay, now I am on the brake side of the bike. Again, we're taking our 6mm Allen key for these 2 bolts. But before we take that off, I'm going to go ahead and slip off the spring that activates the brake light and the brake sensor. And that's just held on right here. Leave that loose. And the second thing is that you'll notice that the mechanism that pushes the hydraulic for the brake has a cotter pin in it. You're going to want to remove that. This kit, in my case, came with a spare cotter pin. So I'm going to take advantage of that and replace mine, because I've actually taken mine on and off a couple of times, and after so many times, the cotter pin just doesn't look so secure anymore. I'm going to pull that out. Take the pin out of the brake lever out. And now I'm going to go ahead and remove these 2 6mm Allen bolts. Okay, so on the brake side, you have this plate. It's smaller. It also has 2 countersunk holes in it. Again, the countersunk holes are going against the motorcycle, the flat side towards you. This little notch is going to go forward like this. So essentially this goes on the bike, and your foot peg assembly mounts on the bottom. In order to do that, we're going to use 2 of the provided bolts. These are the 5mm Allen bolts and the 13mm socket you'll use on these nylon nuts. And as before, I'm going to apply a little bit of thread lock on here. So now my foot peg assembly is safely attached, securely attached to the lowering piece plate. All right, using my 6mm Allen key and my OEM Suzuki bolts, I'm going to thread these back into the frame. Okay, so in the kit, you're provided an all-thread piece with an Allen end on one and solid on the other, and this little long nut right here. What this is for is use it as an extension for the shaft that goes into the hydraulic pump. Because obviously when you lower it down, if you match it up with the factory height, your brake peg is going to be a lot lower. So with this extension, this allows us to go back to sort of a normal geometry. So I've taken this off. This is the OEM Suzuki clip. There's a nut in there. You'll carefully unscrew this off the shaft. And we're going to screw on the long nut carefully onto this. And you can adjust this later. And then to make things a little easier, I'm actually going to put the Suzuki factory nut back in here. And I'm going to thread this by hand first, like that. So now that that is in there, it's a little bit easier to line it up. There we go. Now that's all back together. And you can still use the Suzuki nut that I left on here to tighten everything together. I've adjusted the height with the extension from AdventureTech to where I like it. I've tried this sitting down, standing up, always. The thing I did notice is that this OEM little shaft right here, this pin, You probably won't be able to insert it from the inside. So using the new cotter pin, we're gonna insert the pin from the outside now, and feel free to grease the pin if you need to. And then insert the cotter pin from the inside and flange it out so it's locked. Since you've lowered your foot peg, you're going to have to extend the brake sensor spring. That way, you know, it's not always being engaged. For this, the kit provides this little extension clip right here. So if you see that in your kit, that is what that is for. I'm gonna go ahead and hook it onto the spring, and the other end I'm gonna hook on to the aluminum brake foot lever, just like that. And then you'll just have to fine tune it to where it engages when you apply your brakes and doesn't engage while you're not applying your brakes. Well, that about wraps it up for this install. One thing I will say is that the spring for your rear brake sensor may need to be adjusted based off of where your bike sits. You don't want your brake light to be on for no reason. Also, you want it to turn on when you hit your rear brake. So again, depending on your bike and your setup, you might want to adjust that spring for yourself.
Does it really make a difference? Yes. After 800 miles, I can confidently say, yes. See, with my 34-inch inseam, I feel like I can finally stand without slouching off-road. I also primarily notice a difference when sitting for a long time. My knees are slightly less bent, and what used to be a severely uncomfortable seat is now just moderately uncomfortable. Hey viewers, like what you see? Consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing. There's a lot more where this came from.